effectuating change in their particular spaces and places of work and influence. So I'm eager to learn, to become informed, and even to be inspired, and hopefully to be able to add something to my own personal toolkit of affecting change and leveraging my personal influence for good. I trust that would be also the desire of those of you listening. So with that said, I'd like to just have each of our panelists, and I'll do this in alphabetical order. So Akilah will start first, and I want to give them just a few minutes for some opening comments that come from their world of experience and each of their hearts. So Akilah, if you would.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for inviting me to this platform of these esteemed colleagues here. So glad to be a part of this conversation. But yeah, to your point, just introducing myself again, I'm coming from San Jose State University, serving as the executive director for the Institute for the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change. It's a new role. The Institute started in 2017 as the brainchild of Dr. Harry Edwards. I was appointed in the fall of 2019. So I spent the first semester just trying to get to know the campus as I transitioned from Prairie View A&M University, HBCU, to this space. And it was a great opportunity. And then COVID came and it shook up everything. But I think I've really tried to take it as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to really pivot in this space. And I'll say, and perhaps repeat through this times, to be a bridge in conversations, a bridge on issues of sport and social change, and to bring different communities together, whether it be students, faculty, staff, community members, these great colleagues here on this call. And so our focus at the Institute is really to promote education, research, to create programming, to undergird and really understand this notion of social change. I think the confluence of COVID-19 and, as they call a racial awakening, as I say, I've been woke because I'm in this space, but, racial injustice that sort of emerged and people are sort of acknowledging now has brought forth some great conversation. And I think an opportunity for people to pause, to listen, to consider, and really invest in making change. And so through our engagements, and I'll just, sort of close with this, we've been able to sort of engage on through Zoom, through these media platforms such as this, had about 70 engagements, educating, working with high school students, college, administrators, those in the wider society, started our Sport Conversation for Change webinar platform, hosted a 2-day virtual conference in this space, started an internship program. So we have some amazing students that are working through our institute, and have just had some numerous collaborations within the US and abroad. And then last but not least, again, at the core of us, continue to educate, promote, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and really working to, create some spaces to do some education and some real training so that we can affect policy and practices.
Yeah. Thank you. Anna?
Thank you, and thanks for having me on today. So I'm Anna Isaacson. I head up social responsibility for the NFL. I've been here about 15 years, which is a long time, and have always been in the world of community relations and philanthropy and social responsibility. And our world, the NFL, has shifted a lot, and the role that we play in communities has shifted. The expectations are high and have never been higher for what the NFL does to support the communities that give our league so much, and to support us and our game. And so over the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years, mainly since we faced our own internal and external crisis, specifically around domestic violence, we have taken a very different approach at the league on social issues, and have really tried to be much more proactive and taken a stand on many tough, challenging things that are hard to talk about sometimes. And while we'll never be a one issue league, we look at it as our role to support where we can on many, many issues that are facing our country. And so that ranges everything from military appreciation and cancer prevention to healthy relationships and domestic violence and sexual violence, to social justice, right? And social justice is really now the biggest issue that the league has taken on. And we are working every day with our clubs, with NFL players, to use the NFL platform and the resources and assets we have at our disposal to make a difference in this area and to move the needle. And we've obviously had, many public-facing challenges in this area that I'm sure we'll get into a little later on in the discussion. But we're trying to take our learnings and the time that we've spent listening and meeting with NFL players and do some good. And so we launched our Inspire Change platform several years ago, and that is meant to really focus on 4 key areas under the social justice umbrella. Those are economic advancement, education, criminal justice reform, and police and community relations. And we use resources and public policy advocacy and really our megaphone, right? Our marketing assets to make a difference in these 4 areas. And so excited to talk more about that, but I do really feel like the NFL has a role to play in this space. And, we obviously have things to prove and work to do, and there's a lot more that we have to do, but NFL owners, players, clubs, up from Commissioner Goodell on down, have really put a stake in the ground to say this is an issue that we're really going to focus on and work on 365 days a year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Greg, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I too, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited about the conversation. I guess 2 things I would just say. I would take everybody who's listening back to that moment in the bubble in Orlando. I'm Greg Taylor. I'm the executive director of the NBA Foundation. Prior to that, I was overseeing player development, which is really all the education and resource programs for guys off the court. But I take you back to the bubble, the moment the Milwaukee Bucks decided not to play. And I think what that did was to intersect with the social unrest that was in the country. And it really caused the NBA to think about what is it that we can do differently? What is the world requiring us to be right now? What's the country requiring us to be? And so the league really turned inward, had lots of conversations about how do we use our platform, the notoriety of our players, the brand recognition that we have. And I suppose 3 things came out of it. One is we created a series of internal commitments to really be about making sure that executives of color have real opportunity to grow. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at, on the procurement side around women and Black and brown owned businesses, all of that. Think about it as taking care of your internal house. Lots of work yet to do, but a priority setting. And then we established 2 external focus efforts, the Social Justice Players Coalition, which is really about a 501c4. We're looking at lobbying issues and other things along those lines. And then I actually run the NBA Foundation, first ever since January 4th. So it's been really soon or quick. I guess I would say 2 things, and I too am very excited about the conversation. I think one, what we're trying to do is to really focus on the racial wealth gap. We're focused on young Black youth, 14 to 24. We're trying to help them with economic equity and access. We recognize that right now, as a response to all the social justice work that's happening in the country, so many companies are coming forward and making these bold pledges about issues around equity and access. What we want to do is intersect that energy and provide real ways in which nonprofits, companies, and the NBA can really help promote meaningful employment opportunities for young people. So we can talk about that. And then just lastly, I would say, I think in many ways, our organization is trying to really be thoughtful about what is that evolution from community service to social justice. What does that mean? How do we do it? What has to be in place? Certainly both entities, I'd put them at the ends of a spectrum, are super important. There's none that I'm valuing one over the other, but they are different entities. There are different efforts, and they require different commitments between community service and kind of corporate social responsibility and social justice. We want to be honest and open about that and learn as we go. So it's awesome to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Gene?
Well, Clark, appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel with these unbelievable people. And, I'm like you, I'm looking to learn, to continue to be inspired. And, I've been blessed to to be in intercollegiate athletics for over 40 years now in different environments and serve thousands of student athletes from all walks of life around the world with a diversity of backgrounds. And so I'm looking to pick up some nuggets from these talented individuals on this panel, but also just share some experiences in relation to the questions that you were asked. Lastly, I will also bring to the table, and like you, Clark, and grew up in Cleveland, and I grew up in Cedar and Fairhill, and for those of you from Cleveland, on the first part of my life, and experienced the Huff riots, just front and center. And so when you look at the civil unrest that we've had recently, I will bring hopefully to the conversation some experience that goes way back relative to the start and stops of trying to affect change. So looking to be inspired and looking to learn. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you all. And those are tremendous opening comments. I mean, there's so many different directions I could go, but I'm just thankful for the diversity represented here in terms of experience, work, gender, the like, and that the theme that I heard was this listening and learning piece. And I'm sure the folks that are that are joining us are eager to do that. But one of the questions that challenges me, and I'm sure it probably challenges each of you and many of our listeners, why does change seem to take so long? Gene, you just referenced the Huff riots. My dad and uncles were Cleveland policemen. I can remember them arming up in riot gear during that time, mid 60s. And we still see some of the same types. We know we've made some changes, but why, Gene, I'll give you this first and then everybody else can chime in. Why does it seem as though change takes so long? And on occasion, we might take 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 back, 1 forward. It seems to never really create the kind of consistent momentum. Give me your thoughts on that. And I'd love each of you to kind of chime in on that as well.
Well, you used the term, Clark, that I think about a lot, consistent effort over time. When you think back to all those instances in our history, when this was brought to light, there was no effort that was ongoing. You look at the 3 individuals that I'm blessed to serve time with on this panel, their positions didn't exist, after the Huff riots. The investment to keep the conversation going was not there. The development of programs to help our young people, Greg said it, to help our young people develop the right type of behavior and sensitivity to others around civility. Those just basic things around respect, those things were lost. They start and stop. And so what's beautiful about this one is there seems to be an investment in trying to create things that will sustain. Each of the other panelists talked about programming that frankly should outlive them. So I look at it from a point of view, we've never been in a situation where we've been consistent over time to keep it going. And the last thing I'll share is we never really focus on the systemic issues. The systemic issues are being talked about now. They really are. And then there's leadership who are taking leadership roles to address systemic issues that contribute to our challenges. So that's just a high level.
No, appreciate it.
But I want to reiterate respect. We've lost that in our society. Civility, respect, behavior begets culture. And a lot of our young people, when I see AAU basketball games with the parents fighting in the stands while their sons are playing, respect.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah, thank you. Greg, we're just going to go in reverse order. So Greg, and then Anna,
I really appreciate Gene's comment. I mean, I would just say to folks, to the degree that, if you look historically, redlining, who was able to buy homes, who wasn't. If you look at food deserts, who has access to nutritious food, who doesn't. If you look at the education system being funded by the tax system, and so poor communities are always inherently going to have poorer or lesser resource schools than schools or communities that have higher property values. And even most recently, if you look at the dissemination of the COVID vaccine, I promise you, if you take those neighborhood and community maps and lay them on top of each other, they are virtually identical. And so I think the first thing for me about starts and stops has to be an acknowledge that systemic and institutional racism is real. And I think what happens is there are two issues. One is the everyday person who goes to work every day, that is a teacher, is a nurse, a doctor, a physician, or what, they're going about their work in the most earnest way. And I would argue that most of them are not racist folk, period. But the fact that we're operating in a system that has perpetual, predictable outcomes that are over and over and over, that those maps lay on top of each other, the insidious and repeated nature of systemic racism has to be the foundation of, I would say, the conversations that we're having now. It needs to be acknowledged, one. And then the second goes, I agree with Jean, it goes to values, right? This is a values conversation, meaning we have to value one another. It doesn't matter where you've come from, who you are. We have to really be thoughtful about what is the type of community we all want to be a part of, and recognizing that we're all not starting at the same level. And so those fits and starts are because certain folks win and certain folks lose. And it's because we don't have a universal valuing of everybody's perspective. And I would argue that that's what causes the fits and starts. I'll end with this. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I really believe that the conversations that are happening now as a result of the unrest, I think we can have a different conversation, but we have to look at the systemic issues, and we have to be intentional about what are those systemic gaps we're trying to fill. Otherwise, it's a fit and start.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Greg. Anna?
Yeah, listen, I echo what everyone has said so far. And I think what I've noticed now in this time and place, even more so than just a couple of years ago, is the ability or the willingness for people to talk about the systemic racism and to put it on the table and put it out there, and to say that it's okay and we've come so far as a country, as a society, but that we've got a lot of room to grow, and that there are still problems, and everyone's willingness to, I wouldn't say everyone, but more people being willing to state that at the top and not be shy, for lack of a better word, to say, like, these are the issues that have plagued us for centuries. These are things we haven't, we've come a long way in certain areas, and these are things we really haven't fixed. And so I think I agree with Greg on stating what it is and stating the systemic racism piece of this. I think there's a role for all of us to play in this, and people saying, okay, as you said, most people are walking around and just are just earnest and doing their job, but looking inward and saying, what is the role that I play in perpetuating some of this behavior, perpetuating some of these thoughts? It starts with each of us, right? We all have a role to play. And we've said that in our office for a while, that sort of diversity isn't just like one person's responsibility. And now it's under the DEI umbrella, but it starts with all of us and what we can do and how we talk about things and how we're transparent. And I think that's everybody looking inward and saying, okay, what role do I have to play to move us forward? I think is really important. And then the only other thing I'll add is, I find this, I don't know if others find this in your spaces, but things are moving so fast in this society, and there's something that's a hot topic and everybody's jumping on it, and then all of a sudden something else happens and we sort of have forgotten all the work that we tried to do over here, and we're all sort of suddenly there's this movement to shift to something else that's newer and hotter, and people feel as important in the moment when we haven't actually fixed the problems, and those problems require sustained investment and change. And I know in my role here, I'm always like, well, we haven't fixed that problem yet. Just because we think we put money behind it or we did something, solved it, we've got to really keep it going. And people don't have a lot of patience. They're like, oh, we did that already. We fixed that. And that's just not true.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Akilah?
Ah, all of those comments are great. The culture, systemic racism, understanding, yeah, we didn't fix it. We may have, like Anna said, we put money behind it, but the issue still persists. But I think we also have to go back and look at this notion of how culture was created. You know, if our historical foundations, what this country was rooted on, how it came to be, and the power dynamics that we're able to get started when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about capitalism, heterosexism. These are things that were planted that became seeds, that became a daily practice, that became a tradition, that became a culture. And so as much as we work to fight those changes in these you know, representative civil rights movements, if you will, human rights movements, we have to understand that they move in these cycles, but we keep sort of pushing back and trying to push back against some cultural norms or cultural practices that have become normative. And so I think it's an opportunity, and I like using the words of Ella Baker, you know, great civil rights organizer there behind the SNCC movement, that says, you know, we must not only remember what happened, we must understand. And I think we're at a time right now, again, where I talk about we're at a collective societal pause because COVID stopped us from moving and hustling, bustling, and to Anna's point, moving to the next point, moving to the next issue, that we had to sit in this. We had to sort of reckon with what happened. We saw it visually on the television. It wasn't another isolated case or an exception. We had to live with that reality and sit with that reality. And so many of us are coming to terms with it right now. Our young people are becoming aware of it right now. Some of them are wrestling with the fact, particularly when we talk about student athletes, of recognizing that I'm Black right now. And so I think that's a thing that we're pushing back against, is this notion of culture. So as much as we have strategy to begin to move, we have that old saying of that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So, but I think we're in a space right now where people again are having a pause and a moment to say, yes, I remember these respective events, not only what happened recently, but even historically. And then now we're having conversations to thus understand. And now, even as we talk about our institute, as I work at with my dear colleague, Dr. Amy August, we're talking about this notion of moving, not only talking about having these conversations, this notion of words, but moving to action. And it's up to us in these respective seats here on this panel, and those of you out there, to help everyone sort of make that pivot, that is not only a shift, but it's a cultural shift and a change in ideology and the way that we do our day-to-day practice, the way the policies that we create that create these notions of marginalization and disenfranchisement.
Well, you know what? You launched me. You must be looking at my question sheet, because you led me right to the next area around one of the biggest challenges I face in this space as I become more awake, more informed, more intentional about desiring to be a person of action in these areas, is the challenge of how do you do that consistently when the stream is so working against you on so many levels? How do you individually, in the places that you all sit and I sit, how do you come up with ways to consistently keep pounding that rock in your own space? And I'm going to go to Anna, and then we'll go to Jean, then Akilah, and then Greg. But personally,
how did I know you would start with me on that?
Well, I want to be equal. I want to be equal opportunity here. I don't want to just keep going back and forth, front and back. I want to mix it up a little bit, diversity and inclusion.
It's hard.
So I just want to hear from you all's experience. How do you grapple and wrestle with being a personal agent of change? Because I think that would be helpful to all of us and to those that are listening as well.
It's really hard. I think that's the first thing I'd say. And you know, at the NFL is a corporate entity, and we have an interesting structure that probably I don't need to explain, but we've got 32 clubs and thousands of NFL players and millions of fans. And it is hard. And I think, especially when you are in a crisis mode or you are facing challenge, it is hard, and people have less patience even then, and they want answers quickly and want you to fix problems. And to sustain the work, first of all, I think you have to be authentic and real, and people have to trust that you're in it for the right reasons, and that you're either not floating in or out, or you're doing it for some other personal, agenda or reason. And it's really easy to see through people these days, especially because everyone's out there so much on social media and otherwise. And I think being real, authentic, and having real conversations and admitting when you don't know things, when you need to learn, I think is really important. And it has been, personally for me. I think I always say, my job at the NFL is my job is not to be an expert on any one specific social issue. My job is to best utilize the NFL to make an impact on those social issues, but I need to rely on experts, right? I need to rely on the people who are doing this work and who have lived it. And so part of what I do is I rely on those experts and those people to help guide me so that I can best guide our leadership and our executives and NFL owners to say, this is what we should be doing, or this is not what we should be doing, or don't stop now, you've got to keep going because this is the impact that we're starting to see. But if we turn back now, it's going to go to waste, right? So I think it's hard. I think you have to have a strong voice. If you have a seat at the table, you've got to utilize that voice. And, I have a much thicker skin now than I had many years ago. I started in minor league baseball back in the day. It's a very different world. And so I have a much thicker skin. It's okay to me. Like, my feelings don't get hurt so easily anymore. But I think those are the things that I use personally. But again, in my role where I sit, a lot of it is experts and making sure that people know that where I'm coming from is an authentic place.
You're on mute, Clark. You're on mute.
Thank you, Anna. Really good nuggets there. Gene, you've got that question now.
Yeah, so first of all, I appreciate Anna's comments. I mean, I think it's spot on, really. A couple of things. One, professionally, again, I've been blessed to be in intercollegiate athletics for a long time. So my passion is trying to create an environment for our student athletes to be successful. And that includes these things that we're talking about. It's not just academics and athletics and career path. It's about helping them be the best that they can be and help them become leaders in our complex society. How do I make sure that we have in place not just programs, but the platforms for conversation around tough issues? When you look at any of our teams, I'll use football since Josh is on here. Those young men come from all walks of life, rural, urban backgrounds, different socioeconomic environments, all different types of ethnicities, different religions. I can just go on and on. But we ask them to come together and create the true definition of team. That means set aside all your differences so that you can beat your opponent. So how do you embrace that? How do you take that to the intellectual level so that you can understand that that's a life lesson that a lot of people don't get an opportunity to have? And then what are all the things in between there? And so to Anna's point, we bring in experts. We bring in former student athletes like Clark. We brought you in to talk to some of our teams to help them understand in the moment what they're learning. So professionally, I've tried to just focus on what I can have an impact on. And that's the student athletes I serve. We got 36 of them, 36 sports, over 1,000 athletes. And so I want to have that impact there. And also professionally is on this industry. Years ago, I used to go to athletic director meetings and I'd be the only one in the room, just me. Sometimes I call Charles Harris at Arizona State, say, hey, are you going to show up to the meeting? Otherwise I'm the only one. So I made a decision a long time ago. I can't make a mistake. If I'm going to provide an opportunity for others, I need to make sure I bring it every single day. And now we have a Black Athletic Directors Alliance, which is beautiful for me to watch. And I have nothing to do with it except watch it. So professionally, to your point, Clark, that's where I focus. Personally, it's wherever I can, be it in Columbus, be it on this panel, being wherever I am, to try and just keep the conversation going. I may not necessarily be able to actually run a program, but Anna may call me one day, one of you may call me one day and ask me to do something to help you. I'm on it. It's that simple. And so I kind of understand the blessings that I've had. And so personally, I want to bring it to the table wherever I can.
Akilah, we'll go to you next and then Greg.
Personally, I bring a lot of my youth to the fore. I was born and raised in Topeka, Kansas, to parents of K-12 educators that were brought to Topeka to help continue to fulfill and carry out Brown v. Board. Now, granted, this was the 70s, but it was still like, all deliberate speed from 54 obviously is a slow time. So I learned right there in being in that household to not only being a child of theirs, but just having other mothers and fathers, if you will, that were also in that district that were doing that work, that it takes time, that it's slow, but at the same time, the notion of that there's a need to collaborate and work together in order to bring about change. And so with that, I say from a professional standpoint, I take those memories with me. I take their lived experience with me. And I also take with them, the notion that just stay in my lane in many ways. I have a set of skills that I know, I do well in, I operate well in, and I utilize my education. I utilize my ability to put pen to paper, to write up articles and to uncover truths from professionals or athletes and share that knowledge with others. And in doing so, also understand in this notion of the slow change that takes place, of understanding when we talk about social change, when we talk about these efforts of civil rights, to even Jean's point a couple of questions ago, I may not be here to see the fruits of my efforts. And so it's important to me as a former track athlete, I use the metaphor to pass the baton, to the next generation. So within my professional realm, my goal is to have, different, workshops. We just had one actually last week to talk to students about what is social change? How can we do this social change? And also provide to them and help them understand there's many ways to do this. Yeah, you may go out and march and you may see demonstration, but many believe that that is the only way to do it. And as I expressed to them, my activism is education. Others, their activism in the way that they, plant a seed and communicate may be through social media. Others may be writing letters to politicians. Others may be actually going out and doing service and starting programs, mentorship programs. So there's many ways to do this. And I help them also understand that, believe it or not, we need all of these voices. We need multiple ways, because then you can begin to attack the system, right? Then you can begin to plant seeds to change the culture. And so I think that's one of the things that, I've learned from growing up, from the seeds that were planted within me, and also from learning from my parents too at an early age, is that we have to arm our youth. Because in many of these efforts of social change, they are the ones at the fore. So when I think about Brown v. Board, I think about those little children in the classrooms that weren't there. Their parents weren't there to protect them, right? I think about a Ruby Bridges, parents weren't there. James Meredith, they're going in on their own. So we have to arm our young people as well to be conscious and knowledgeable and to have a skill set to navigate these spaces and to cope with the stressors of social change.
Thank you. I just want to take this moment before Greg takes the floor and just remind those of you that are listening, please submit questions if you have any, and we'll address those here in the next 15 minutes. So powerful what all of you have said, Anna and Jean and Akilah, around this idea of everybody doesn't have to run in the same lane to affect change, and to be able to be comfortable with that. I know personally, I find myself feeling as though man, am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? But there's a sense of understanding that it's a collaborative effort. You're a spoke in the wheel in many cases, and being that best spoke is part of effectuating long-term, lasting, meaningful change. So Greg, would love to hear your comments on how you personally approach being a change agent.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I'd really go back to, I thought Anna's opening was really great. Like every move is about courage. And there are days when I'm courageous and days when I've missed the mark. There's no question about that. I think I would argue that change, for it to be sustained over time, it happens in the small conversations that you have to courageously have with people who are like you and who aren't like you. And you have to seek those out. I'd also remind folks that, in my opinion, listening, educating yourself, being empathetic about the world and the experience of other people are in fact courageous actions, right? And are in fact actions that you can take. And I think what happens is now, because the incidents in community feel so big, that people think action is only when you see the big things that are changing. But I promise you that if you are taking the time to understand and walk empathetically and listen to other people, those are actually revolutionary acts in and of themselves, one. And you have to find those opportunities. I think I put that on the table. I think also, look, again, I'm in a big company, corporation. The NBA has all kinds of rules and policies and practices and the like. And I think in many ways, we're really blessed that our mega superstars are our most socially conscious. And what it does is it creates an accountability measure where the league is like, we need to be on the right side of history, basically, right? There's all of these things happening in community, all this social unrest. Our guys are already woke and already active and have a real powerful voice. Our leadership at the league, we are often called a progressive league on these issues. I think our leadership is really in a moment where we recognize that we have to have a longstanding attention span on these issues. I'm blessed that the NBA Foundation has a 10-year commitment coming out of the gate with an expectation that it'll be much more than that. I think to someone's earlier point about not having a short attention span, but all of it requires courageous actions at the big level and the small level. It requires allies, and I think it requires accountability, right? And the question is, where do you find accountability in thoughtful ways? I think all of that is what leads to sustained action. And when you have really talented folk who are trying to make change in their communities, good things happen. But I want to remind folks that actions are the everyday changes that you can make in your lives. All of that is what we need in this time of change right now.
Beautifully said. I mean, great comments by everyone. And I know I've gleaned a couple of additional nuggets from my own book bag as a change agent and one who wants to influence for good going forward. We've probably got about 10 more minutes before Nicole comes back to offer up some questions that may have come from those joining us. With that, I would like to see if each of you would maybe offer an example of where you've seen or where you've stepped into that courageous act to bring about change. Whether or not you've seen the fruit of it, by stepping into that conversation or into that particular opportunity that you were being active in changing. I'm going to give you an example from my personal life where I didn't do it. And it's a relatively small, but it pained me that I didn't. I was in a bad basketball game in Bankers Life Arena. I was working, actually Greg was overseeing the NBA player development area and I was player development director for the Pacers at the time. But I was at a game in my seat and some boisterous, inebriated fan was just acting a fool. He was rooting for the Bulls, that's who was in town, and just making all kind of noise and just totally out of bounds. And there was something in me that wanted to step up and say something. I knew that would be the right thing to do, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I sat down until somebody else made the move, and ultimately this person was escorted out. Greg talked about those moments of courage. Sometimes we make contact, sometimes we miss. I missed on that one. And it pained me that I didn't, but another opportunity presented itself not long after that, and I didn't miss. So that's an example. I'd love to hear if there's something that sticks with each of you in terms of a personal moment of courage where you stepped in, no matter how small or large, just as a way perhaps to encourage those that are listening. I will start with Greg. I'll let you go, Greg, and then we'll go Akilah, Anna, and I'll let Jean close it out, and we should be ready for audience questions after that.
Thanks, Clark. I mean, one of the things for me that my time in player development really allowed was getting to really know our players off the court. I have tremendous relationships with the players, and so fortunate enough to be in the bubble in Orlando. And what we were using was the time when the players weren't playing. I recognize what was so unusual about the bubble for us was that you had all of our players in one space. There was no paparazzi or media running around. And so you had guys fishing and riding bikes and playing cornhole and all this stuff after the games. And it was an amazing opportunity to just have folk together in fellowship. And so just really blessed to be there. And I think we were able to bring in Breonna Taylor's mother to talk about what happened with Tamika Mallory and some other folk who is one of the lead activists around the Breonna Taylor case. And the way in which our guys wanted to learn about all of the issues behind the scenes and how they could use their voice and educate themselves on the issues at hand and really understand from a kind of a visceral perspective what was happening, led to lots of conversations about the no-knock legislation, which was part of the challenge as to why they went into the wrong apartment and whatever. And what was really heartening is that what happened was, and I just credit Tobias Harris, just one of the most vocal folk and amazing player for the Sixers, as you know, the players really came to their own decision to use their platform rather than talk about the game or the playoffs or wins and losses or whatever, was just to talk about, say her name, right? And really understand, like, I'm educating myself and I'm going to use my platform to raise visibility on this tragic killing. And it was rewarding for me to be behind the scenes about that. It was also rewarding for me because you got to see our players. There's so much more than just basketball players, right? They're change agents, they're leaders, they're fathers, they're leaders. Just, it was really rewarding to see that and to see them self-organize themselves around and use that platform. And I would argue their visibility lend a really important hand to part of the justice that was served in that case, even though I know there are issues still pending, but a really powerful moment. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Akilah?
I think there's so many examples of times when, seeing some action or inequitable statement, even in a meeting, a faculty meeting, staff meeting, things of those nature. But I kind of go back to my days as a student, in particular, as a doctoral student, doing this work, and even as a young professor in this space, because the work that I do, I write on the experiences of Black female college athletes and what challenges they've experienced. And, I've had people say, well, this would be good, but it'd be better if you compare them to the white students. So we really know what they're going through is valid. And I pushed back. I said, no. I said, we know about your experiences. This population is important. And even being told by other colleagues in that space of, why is this important? Why do we need to understand what she goes through? And initially, obviously, yes, I took offense because I'm like, I am she. But I kept pushing, kept being steadfast in that. And in many ways, I think just now, 15 years later, sort of seeing the fruits of that, is that the stories of Black women, to Greg's point, talking about Breonna Taylor, right, are important. Their lived experiences, their marginalization, the injustice that happens to them on a daily basis are important, and we need to talk about it. We need to unearth it. Yes, we need to understand the experiences of Black men as well. Yes, we need to understand the experiences of other people of color and LGBTQ+ communities as well. but we need to make sure that we're having an opportunity to voice all of these communities and hear their challenges so that we can begin to support them in their development and their engagement such that they can be fully human, right? And that they can be, you know, productive and give back. And so I continue to work with Black women. I continue to work with what I call my sister docs as we continue to write on our lived experiences to help individuals understand that you are important and you're a value, and we need to tell these stories and to get, just, you know, have everybody continue to do their work. So that's my areas in my scholarship and writing on self.
So I'll chime in next. There's definitely been some moments like that here. I mean, I think for me and for the league, we've had a lot of very public challenges the last couple of years, specifically on social issues. I think the work that Colin Kaepernick and other NFL players have done and started several years ago, it took time for the league to really listen and learn from that, and to say what role can and should the league be playing to support that work, rather than seem like there's some divide against it. And I think we had a lot of really tough internal conversations, less so this year, because thankfully we had a lot of the tough conversations in 2016 and 2017, but a lot of tough conversations. And I remember one meeting specifically where we were just talking about what we should be doing in the social justice space as a league. And I remember sort of saying like this, it felt like we were hanging our players out there, right? Like we needed to do more to support and to be unified. And I tried to make the point that that the issues that NFL players and NBA players and others were raising were really American issues, and not player issues and not NFL player issues, but that they were sort of human issues. And this is part of what I think the role of social responsibility in sports has and always is like we are institutions that people look up to. We have a role to play in society. There's not that many cultural institutions left in this country that can still move the needle on issues. And if not us, who? And it was, you know, there were a lot of conversations around, we've taken on big issues. We've taken on tough issues. Like there's nothing tougher than this. Why can't we be all in, right? Why can't we look at these as human issues and not just say this is something that someone else is dealing with? That went over, I don't know, it went over okay at the time. But I think in time, it's been, you know, I think we've seen these issues have only grown, and more people have gotten behind them and support them. And what we talked about in the beginning, are comfortable now speaking out on issues. And I think it, as I just said, it made the conversation in 2020, it helped make the conversation in 2020 a lot easier, because we did a lot of the hard work 3 years ago to come together as an organization to say, okay, you're right. These are human issues. These are American issues, and we are going to put a stake in the ground and fight for them. And we are going to work to collaborate with NFL players and to be as one with them as we can be. And that's a work in progress. And there are steps back, but the goal is to go forward together.
Well, thank you for stepping in there when you did, because obviously that was part of laying the foundation for moving forward. So appreciate that. Jane, close us out, and then we'll hopefully have some questions that folks have written in, but this has been rich and really, really good. Thank you all. Go ahead, Gene.
I'll just be quick. There's two moments. One, to your question, Clark, a proud moment, actually a little different around diversity, was when our student athletes, it actually came from our men's hockey team here, with an initiative around if you can play, you can play. And it really was interesting how it organically spread throughout our student athlete population, and many of our sport teams embraced that concept and started promoting the reality around the acceptance of different people's sexuality. And it was beautiful. So, but for me, I knew that those conversations were happening in the locker room. And so making sure that we had programming and bringing in experts to help continue that. So that was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Well, lastly, I think personally, to your question, I look back at my life, and the one thing there's a number of incidents, but one that I really feel bad about is, whenever I was stopped because I was Black, I did what I was taught to do. And I think there should have been one step that, I wish my father had taught me, was get the badge number, the name, and get the badge number. There's ways we could have done that discreetly and turn that doggone thing in, because there are people who care. I have a daughter who's a police officer in Phoenix, and I know really what the group dynamics is there. So I wish back in the day, the number of times that I was stopped, that I had implemented that strategy, because it might have affected some change.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Well, thank you all. This has been really helpful, really great. I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, Nicole, but really great comments and input and insight. And I know I've been helped, and I trust that those listening have been helped and encouraged, informed a little more. I mean, I know an hour is not a lot of time, but my late dad used to always say, a little bit of something better than a whole lot of nothing. And this has been more than a little bit of something.
Absolutely. Well, don't go anywhere, Clark. You're in this too now.
Okay,
So
all right.
I'm just going to go through some of the questions that we haven't, and forgive me in advance. We may not have time for all of your questions. They're all so rich, and I think they're going to lead us to some really good conversations. So apologies in advance, but we're going to do as many as we can. The first one I think is really, just such a simple but insightful question, which is, how do we define successful social change in the time ahead? And Greg, I'm wondering if you could start us, and maybe Clark, you could jump in on this. But how do we define what success looks like?
I think it starts with equity. I think we have conversations about lifting all boats, but we have to recognize that some are tied to the dock and some are in the middle of the lake. And so to me, that success has to be defined by equity. And that means you have to move in an intentional way. And you have to realize that there are going to be some folk who get more resources than others because historically they haven't. And I think we have to have that conversation that success for me is not, if you're pro me, doesn't mean I'm anti you. It just means we've got to be clear about what it is that has to happen and be intentional about it. So I think that's where I would start. And I think what's difficult is there's a values issue in terms of valuing everybody the same, that we have a lot of work to do, because what happens in the conversations in the quiet spaces or behind closed doors, that's really the what's festering in this country, in my opinion. So that needs to be made public. And I would argue that, we've got to be thoughtful about equity, which means we got to be intentional.
And I echo 100%. I would just add that fair isn't always equal. It's been unequal from the equity and access standpoint for centuries. So fair is not equal. There has to be, to Greg's point, there's going to be some trying to catch up that requires an intentionality around serving those, informing those, uplifting those who have been left behind. And that's the reality. But there is resistance to that. That's systemic resistance based on the things that have been normalized, to Akilah's point earlier, in our way of going about life. And so fair is not equal. Intentionality is essential. And that's all been part of what's been said here today. But the equity and access piece is going to be the heavy lift of this work going forward.
Absolutely. Anna, this question goes to you, but I'm hoping that Jean may jump in as well. Looking at the social responsibility of, the question is about the NFL specifically and how that differs from other typical corporate entities. And is that responsibility driven through athletes, fans, teams, executives? And I'm thinking, Jean, if you could help us see how the university kind of comes into this role of having a responsibility.
I got a little echo there. Did you guys get or is it just me? You got
No,
I'm getting the echo too.
Okay, I think I got the question.
Well, maybe Anna, could you jump in first and then Jean maybe follow? Because they were asking specifically about the NFL, but I'm wondering if we could kind of look at both.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. I mean, how are we structured from a social responsibility standpoint, or whose responsibility is social responsibility at the league?
The question is, how does the social responsibility of the NFL differ from that of a typical corporate entity?
Got it. I think for us, the difference is that, I mean, there's a few differences, but I think for us, it's very public. I think, there's many companies have foundations, they have, CSR departments. A lot of what they do is behind the scenes. That's what I thought I was signing up for, to be honest, many years ago. I didn't realize this would be, a public job. But there's a lot, I would say there's a lot more scrutiny. We have to be very transparent. And I'll give a quick example. When we launched our breast cancer awareness campaign in 2009, we weren't the first people to launch a pink campaign, right? There was a lot of pink campaigns around, and it was called cause marketing, and people, you'd make money on a pink product, but you would donate some money back, right? And that was okay, right? You make some money, you donate some money back. Well, for the NFL, it's not okay. We cannot, and we weren't trying to make money on breast cancer, but there was this cynicism that we were just trying to sort of sell pink product and sell more jerseys and get more women involved in the sport. And that somehow, we were trying to keep money and not donating it back. And so at that point, we made a business decision going forward that under no circumstances on any of our cause marketing were we going to accept any profit at all, like any revenue at all, not even to cover expenses, not even to cover our costs, nothing. Like we were going to take a loss on all of this because there was a higher expectation on us to show that this was really for, charitable and community purposes. And I would say that expectation and that mandate feels a little bit different for sports and for the NFL specifically than it does for other companies.
We're in a, is that my echo or is that somebody else? That's me?
I think it's me. I'm going to mute.
Okay, so I think, Nicole, for us in athletics, in higher education, it's education. When our student athletes decide to take a stance on something, whatever it is, we try our best to try and make sure we give them the resources to be educated on what they're doing. Last year when Tuck Boylan, our linebacker, and his girlfriend, who happens to be Black, decided to do the Kneel for Nine deal in front of our stadium, we wanted to give them facts. Just don't go out, get everybody together and go kneel. So give them facts. And so it was an unbelievable event because they were able to promote actually some of the things that Greg said earlier around systemic things that need to be addressed. And so our space is a little bit more educational, but it also goes back to what Anna said earlier. We're public. Our student athletes are public. They have a platform. We want to help them take advantage of that platform and affect change the right way. So it's the education that's really a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Akilah, this is such a straightforward and simple thought for all of us, but Eric's asking how he personally can change things in a city like Columbus. He feels like he has a small platform, but he wants to make a difference. How could we advise people within their small space that they occupy to be the change?
As I say, everybody can do something. and kind of going back to the point of, staying in my lane. What area are you passionate about? What are you concerned with? What is your education in? What is your career area? You can make change in those spaces. I think Clark said this, it doesn't have to be a grand, gesture, but doing some small things in your spaces can begin to plant a seed. At the same time, I say, connect and network. There are other organizations that are doing this work. And it's very easy to sort of reach out to them and say, hey, I want to join in and work with you all. And so become a part of a greater collective. And that's how some of these change efforts do come about, is by connecting, by building community, and you're working together where you all can, yes, plant seeds in your own space, but then work together to plant seeds in other places collectively. So there's much that you can do. Find what you're passionate about and find, again, the best way that you want to make that change. Like I said, is it education? Is it research? Is it mentoring? Is it holding conversations like this? Everyone, has an opportunity.
Hey, Nicole, on that point, I would just also say, you really have to get proximate with the issues that you're interested in. Like, you can't sit back in your privileged, comfortable position. Brian Stevens talks about proximity. Like, you have to get out. If it's about community, spend time in that community, meet people from that community, recognize your own privilege. All of that has to happen before you feel like, like you're doing for versus doing with, right? And I think all of those are important acts that people who are interested in getting active in these spaces, like, it starts with your own position and your own perception and your own knowledge of what those issues are. Don't presume you know what answers are for communities you aren't a part of. Take time to become proximate with the issues.
What a great point. We have a question here that is probably more suited maybe to Anna, Greg, and even Clark, you could jump in. We have someone with us who has experienced discrimination during their job search because they're an international student, and that many organizations in sports require applicants to be US citizens and are not willing to sponsor work visas. How can we address this kind of discrimination from a diversity and equity standpoint?
Anna, you gonna take a stab?
I'm going to defer to my experts on the panel.
I mean, I think it's a hard question, and I don't necessarily feel the most knowledgeable on it to give the best answer, to be honest. But what I would say though is that I think we have entered into a different phase in our country. I'll say it like that, and where we can have more of these conversations, and there's different dialogue going on, and there's an openness and a willingness, and people are willing to listen. And so to me, now's the time. I don't exactly know how to change it, or whether, what the holdup is, or how companies actually work in that way. But I do think that if there's a time to have those conversations, this is a good time to have them.
Only thing I would add is I just think the international perspective is one that companies like the NBA value at a very, very high level. Forgive me, I don't know about the visa international citizenship issues, but I would argue that frame your international experience as being tied to the outcomes of companies like the NBA and how you can be helpful. I certainly know we're operating in countries that it's more than just, putting the pamphlet in the language of the country. There's cultural norms, and there's understandings of how, written and unwritten rules. All of that, I think, are ways in which can be viewed as a real strength. And I think you got to be express about that. Again, I'm setting aside the visa issues or the immigration issues that sounded like you were raising, but view your international experience as a real value and tie it to the outcomes of the company. That's
a great point. Akilah and Jean, we have a question from Randall asking about what we're doing on campuses to, Jean, you mentioned about Kneel for Nine, which was a, extremely important moment this summer. But what are we doing on campus in terms of introducing new curriculum or programs for student athletes, or next steps that faculty can utilize to keep the conversation moving forward? Akilah, you want to start?
Well, as we look across our universities, our higher ed, I see an overhaul at every level taking place. I think once once we erupted into these conversations back in April, May, it was just a top down, bottom up, everyone looking at from the president's office, creating, and I think we saw a lot of universities creating positions, I would say in a reactive way, that we need to bring in more diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those specifically focusing on Black issues in our DEI offices at the president level. I talked earlier, with the ADID, in particular, that I think it was the athletics diversity and inclusion designee becoming appointed through that. Granted, it was started with the NCAA prior to all of this, but the insertion of individuals in these various spaces to support conversations, to be at the table, if you will. I see within our faculty ranks, going through and having conversations, because faculty are, I think, now being heard. Those Black faculty, people of color, people are now listening. And granted, we've been talking for decades about marginalization and injustices and challenges when we talk about tenure and promotion coming forth. So faculty are sitting and looking at policies and how these promotion practices are put together to go back in to make sure things are equitable. We're seeing athletic departments kind of come together, and I would say in many ways, reaching out now. Because again, the university is structured in such a way where everyone operates in silos. And so they don't sort of reach across the aisle into another department, into another space. But I've seen over the past few months, for example, and speaking specifically to athletics, of reaching out and connecting to our offices at the Institute, as well as other faculty that specialize in this area when we talk about race relations, justice training, and utilizing them as experts for support. And it goes back to a lot of things, again, that I've been writing about for years. If we've got to reach out to individuals that are experts on our own campuses to support the student and their holistic development. So we're seeing a lot of that taking place now. I'm seeing positive changes and things being moved and changed in policies and programs to be supported such that students can engage. Faculty are feeling more of value and that their voice is being heard. And I think when we have students, when we have faculty, when we have staff, all feel like that they belong on that campus, you have a much healthier environment. And again, that change and that cultural shift do move.
Absolutely.
And I would just add to that, because she articulated it well, the same thing is happening here in the many campuses across the country. She said it excellently. The only thing I would add is funding for a lot of the programs that are emerging out of the different task forces and conversations. Presidents and institutions are putting funding in place and actually accessing grants that are existing. And so, Greg, don't be surprised. You'll probably get an application for your foundation. But at the end of the day, I think that the funding piece where it's needed is also being put in place, so which is really beautiful. It's a really great thing to see. And I'll share one real quick story because she just made me think of something. Kind of reverts to Clark's earlier question. The impetus that grew organically to get our students on campus to vote. It was phenomenal. Never in my history have I ever seen in higher education the concerted effort among the student population to vote. Whoever they voted for, I have no clue. But it was beautiful to watch all these students just driving other students to vote. It was cool.
That's awesome. All right, we have
96% of NBA players register. Yeah, same thing, Gene. Same
phenomenal. Phenomenal. Well, for our last question, I'd like all of you to tackle this, and I'm going to combine two questions from Casey, who's a student at Ohio State. In one aspect, he's asking, as a white person living in a society where white people are more likely to deny systemic racism than other races, what can he do to be an ally for racial social justice? And concurrent with that, he's really just asking, in light of the incredible energy that came out of the summer in such a tragedy, but it seems like it's dissipating to a degree, and we need to keep people engaged for change to continue to take place. So how do we do that? How do we get the message out there for people to be agents of change, and how do we keep this progress moving forward? Clark, would you start us?
I actually sat in on Dr. D'Angelo, who wrote White Fragility, on her webinar last night, and was just blown away with the power she gives to that. I haven't read the book yet, but the power she gives to the data and the historical context of systemic racism. As it relates to those who are white and desiring to be authentically, to use Anna's word, engaged, it starts really with the simple realization that this is real, this is factual, this isn't made up, and that it's part of the fabric of what leads to systemic inequality and injustice, and that has to be chipped away at from all sides, and particularly from those who happen to be white. There's a real urgency around being informed, being educated, and dealing with the reality, and then taking steps, like we all have to, small steps in our conversations, in our circles of influence, in our daily interactions and actions, to be against that current and to be aligned with others who are trying to knock that down and change it and change the paradigm. It's long-term work, but it starts with each of us recognizing the reality of it, and particularly for those of the white race to realize that's real and that there's a role that they must play in helping change it. I lost track of the other part of the question.
Just keeping the energy going, that, the energy.
Well, again, this point has been made throughout this conversation, that change is slow. There has to be an intentionality and what we call long-suffering endurance. The Bible talks about patience as being long-suffering. There has to be a commitment and an investment. Athletes understand this to some degree, maybe more than most. I would say there are other populations too, but I'm from the athletic space. So that consistent commitment to delayed gratification, that looking at the prize and seeing this is what I'm attempting to go after. It's the same with change, that it's out there. We'll see incremental signs of it happening, but that shouldn't change our urgency. And sometimes when things aren't just on the front burner, doesn't mean the stove's not on. There are times for great work and energy and visibility, but there's also time for slower, less visible. So all of that is necessary. The energy comes from the individuals connected to other energized folks, whether that's visible or not, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Gene, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I don't know if I could say it as eloquently as Clark did. I mean, I think he was spot on. And I would go back a little bit to what Greg said about, I think the terminology he used was proximate, and try and educate yourself and not try and go into a space that you can't really truly lean into and affect change. Just be realistic. In order to be authentic and genuine, you have to kind of make sure you're stay in your lane, as we was alluded to earlier. So even though your effort might not seem grandiose, your effort is important. And so I would say, get educated. I was in a conversation, I can't remember when, about redlining. People didn't know what redlining was. They had no clue until they started hearing about it now. So educating people on where did it come from and what is it and what was its intent? And so then you feel like, okay, I understand now. I can watch for those things. So anyway, just educate yourself and operate in your lane, and you can help affect change.
Great.
The assumption in the question is that it's fleeting. I would say trauma is exhausting. I mean, let's go Kendrick Lamar, right? I'm mad, but I'm not stressed. You know what I'm saying? And so the notion that it waxes and wanes really does underscore your perspective around the issue, like real talk, right? Because those who have been in the struggle, the trauma is consistent, and folks still have to live their lives, feed their babies, go to work every day. And it's almost like these episodic episodes remind people who have choice whether or not they're impacted by the issues. But those of us who don't, trauma is exhausting, and folks have been in this struggle every day, all day for a very, very long time. That's what I mean about getting proximate, because it's not that the movement is waning, right? It's just you can't be mad all the time, right? And so you got to figure out how you contribute and move forward. I think that person needs to learn about what those issues are.
Yeah, and I would just add as an ally, it's consistent. It has to be consistent, and it's not just like it's being an ally consistently over time, and not just in like the hot moment, or like it's being there, and in the good and the bad, and being available when needed, and knowing that people can rely on you and your allyship.
Akilah, you get the last word.
To Greg's point, I'm tired. This work is exhausting. It is something, and for, again, in many ways, and what everyone has said, educate yourself. Because a lot of this labor, this emotional labor, has been on people of color to come in, save the day, tell me how do you feel, what should I do? We've got books for that. You click a button, there's several webinars to help you work through this process. And so we need to not put the onus on people of color. We need to not put the onus on Black student athletes. We need to not put the onus on, as much as our women of the WNBA and our men of the NBA and NFL players and other athletes in different sports, soccer, track and field, whatnot, have taken up that changes. So to the point of this panel, this notion of intersectionality, if you are in position to affect systemic change, or to affect change at the systemic or the system-wide level, put your efforts in that space. If you are great in writing policy and are seeing things that need to be changed, write policy, put forth briefs that can change practices that are happening in those spaces. And again, to the point of creating opportunities for access, equity and access, so we can promote that representation. We've got to look at all those things from that intersectional view, and make sure that we're all working in this effort, and that it's not just on one group to help educate and help right the wrongs, and that we're bringing everybody to this collective space to use their skills and talents to change the culture.
Well, that is the perfect segue to introducing our next session, which is going to take place on April 15th. And the theme of that is actually developing narrative for change. And to that, we have invited Wendy Smooth, who's an extraordinary academic and the head of our equity issues here at Ohio State. She is an amazing woman. I'm thrilled she's going to be here. Dante Washington from the Columbus Crew will be here. Sid Ziegler from Outsports. Nicole Auerbach with The Athletic, an extraordinary writer. Adrian Haraway from the John McClendon Minority Initiative. And Katie Barnes from ESPN will all be with us on April 15th. And we certainly hope that you can join us at 4 o'clock. I know that there's a virtual standing ovation for this incredible gathering of people. Your insights and the words that you have shared with us will change us all. And I can't thank you enough for Clark, for your moderation, for all of you for being here and sharing your insights with our audience. And please know that you are inspiring the rest of us to be agents of change. And we are truly grateful for you and all that you do. So thank you for everyone for being here. Thank you to this panel. And we very much hope to see you on April 15th on behalf of the Sports and Society Initiative. Thank you for being here. Be safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Bruce.